So our purpose in putting this together is to give you a flavor of what is involved in these processes of applying for academic jobs, the interview processes on campus, and again, the next stages in those processes too. So Dr. Villmoare will come up and share some ideas with us. He again has to run to another scheduling conflict, so he'll start things off, and then I'll come back up and introduce our second speaker. And then I will probably share some thoughts as well as part of this discussion.
Okay, so I've applied for 2 academic jobs. I had 2 academic jobs, one in London and one here. The first one I got right out of my PhD, and then this one is a little bit further along, so I have 2 sort of swings at the ball. So I can just tell you what I did, and I think that it's a reasonable way to go. So I would go all the way back actually to your cover letter. I'm just going to take you back there. So in most departments, there is a person who is not necessarily the best scholar, although he could be a good scholar. It's someone who is a good salesman, who's in your department, who understands the material that you're going to be talking about, but is dynamic, and you get the impression that this person knows how to sell themselves. You need to find that person. Because most of us, at least me as an academic, I am not used to self-promotion, and I was always taught to not self-promote. But this is one of those instances in which you absolutely have to learn how to do that. So after you write your cover letter and you have your advisor go over your cover letter, find this person, send it to them. Because you need to be pitching this material not to someone who is like you or even knows what you know necessarily. Especially if you're an academic, you're going to know what most people won't know. So you need to be able to convey what's interesting and important. And so you need to have someone sort of outside the sphere of knowledge that you have. So that's the first thing I would say when you do your cover letter. You need to find this person. And then when you are making your job talk, assuming you get an interview, you should do the same thing with your job talk. You need to give your job talk 15, 20 times to everybody in the department, and then give it to this person, and then make sure that they approve of it. Okay? So with regards, let's assume you get an interview, you have to think you're going to be competing against people who are essentially equally qualified as you, right? And that means that what's going to get you this position is not going to be whether you're academically qualified, it's whether you can sell yourself, right, in the job talk. So when I gave my first job talk, there's usually 2 tiers of interviews. There's a phone interview or a Skype interview, and then an in-person interview. So when I gave my Skype interview, I made it a point to stand up in the Skype interview, not sit at a desk, right? And apparently that made a big difference because you come across as much more engaged and you have more presence and you can wave your hands around a lot more effectively when you're giving a job talk standing up. And so they invited me to sit here actually. I'm standing to hopefully communicate the fact that this is important because they want to know that you can communicate effectively and would be a good instructor, right? Well, I'm assuming that you're looking for an academic position, right? They want someone who can lecture clearly and effectively, right? So this is important, right? So when you give your job talk, either one, it'll be a PowerPoint presentation, presumably. I'm sure you've heard this before, okay? But you should never, ever read anything, right? This should be so memorized that everything is completely second nature. You anticipate each slide, you know what's going to be out there, so you just come up and you point to a few pictures or graphs or whatever. If there is something that you are afraid you will not remember, you circle something on the graph, point an arrow, and make a note, right? But do not be looking down. You should be engaged like it's a conversation the whole time, right? And that way people have confidence that you know this material well, right? And the other thing I would say is that this also establishes your presence. In other words, if you are out there projecting to everybody, right, and you look people in the eye and you talk to them, then that is much more persuasive than reading off note cards, right? Even if you only occasionally have to, it makes you seem like there's something you don't know, or you might not be that good under pressure, or you might forget things, and any little thing, you never know what it is. It's interesting to have Peter here because these are all things that I did. Now, I don't know what it was that worked, but all I can tell you is what I've done twice and seemed to work. But Peter will be in a position to say that it's not going to work, or whatever, right?
You did get hired, which...
Yeah, so I mean, I did get hired, but,
volumes,
it could be confirmation bias. Everything I do, I walked and left. The other thing I would say is that it's really important to know your audience. And people always say this, so when you give your talk, when I gave my talk, Peter's the only other person in the department who studies evolution. So, but I was talking about evolutionary anatomy. So basically I could be sure that whatever I said, nobody was going to stand up and say, wait a minute, let's go back and look at the confidence intervals in that graph. That wasn't going to be my audience, okay? So I talked big picture and tried to explain why it was interesting and engaging. All of us who are getting advanced degrees, nowadays information is so much minutia, and everyone has to focus so narrowly. So you have to persuade the world that what you're doing actually matters, right? And this goes for the cover letter, but also the job talk, right? So when I gave my talk to this department, I had to say, this is why this is important, it's fantastic, it'll change everything, right? But if I were giving an interview at a place where they had a lot of evolutionary anatomists, I would not have done that, because I wouldn't have had to sell those, right? I would have had to make sure that every graph was exactly right and every sentence was completely defensible, because someone would stand up and say, wait a minute, I don't believe you, right? So you just have to know that going in. Part of this knowing your department, and this is, I am really, really bad with names, like sort of famously bad with names, but I made it a point to memorize every single person's name in the department. Okay, so you go from, if you get a job interview, you come in, you go office to office, right? You don't want to say, look outside the door to see what their name is and then sit down. You need to know who they are, you need to know what they study. And it's useful, I think, to be able to relate what you do to what they do. So, Bill is in the department, Jankovic, if I pronounce the name right. So, he's a cultural anthropologist. You would think there would be no overlap. But we did find things, right, where behavior and evolution could overlap, and that might affect selection on schools. Like, I found a way to try to make it connect for him. Okay, so that way he sees the value of having me in the department not just as a person over here, but also just as sort of sharing an intellectual interest. Right. So I would say that to me that seemed to be a pretty important thing. So, and it's hard because you're going to be under pressure and people are going to be throwing names at you. So you're going to have to prepare well ahead of time. Somehow, miraculously, I did actually remember everyone's name during the interview, but that was not a given when I came in, so I spent a lot of time doing that. I would say, just sort of other tips, when they fly you in, make sure you're well rested, right? I mean, the night before my dissertation defense, I slept exactly no hours, and it showed when I gave my defense. I was scraggly and delirious, and somehow they passed me. So when I came for this job interview, I stole one of my wife's Ambien, right? And just when I went to sleep, I took an Ambien and bam, 8 solid hours of sleep, right? And that way I remember everyone's names and I can give my talk and know all the things. In terms of your personal presence, I'm a jacket and tie kind of a person. I think you should be slightly more formal than everyone else there, right? It just denotes respect, right? I mean, I'm still the only person in the department that wears a tie, but I was definitely going to do one for the interview, and I made sure my shirt was pressed, and it was not an informal, tie-like shirt like this. Like it was, I made sure that they understood that I respected the fact that they flew me in there, and that I was going to, meet that respect. It might not matter for a bunch of people, but the thing is you have a room full of people voting. You don't want to give them any excuse to say no, right? You're going to make it so that every single possible advantage is yours along the way, right? Talk about the negotiation process, or
any quick thoughts on that?
Yeah. So this is a tough one. So when I negotiated for this position, I had turned to people who had negotiated positions, and they said, "Ask for the moon. Try to get a lot of startup money and ask for a big salary, and you're the big cheese, so you should demand it." And actually, it almost got my offer pulled. So I would say, be careful. Chris, the dean, apparently I get this phone call. You remember? Yeah, I get this phone call saying, Brian's crazy or something. I didn't hear the other end of it. But when I turned to all the other academics, I knew and said, yeah, they threatened to pull the offer. They were like, what? So I feel like at that point, they have all the leverage and you have very little leverage. So push as far as you think you reasonably can and then say, fine, I surrender. Because let's face it, you need the job more than they do. In my particular position, there are, I would estimate 5 jobs in the world per year for what I do. Right? So this is just like, I am not in a, it is a buyer's market, not a seller's market. So I had, I was glad to get it. So, I got a reasonable startup package, I think, although, you hear stories about people that get 5 times as much. So you always think, But, I feel like I pushed as far as I could and then just held back. And I asked for all the normal things that they have on that list. You want moving expenses, you want to see if you get health insurance over the summer, all those things. And basically, Chris said, no, and I just had to say, okay, that was just the way it was. But some places will give it. I just think it depends on how much money the university system has, you know, and Nevada is not as rich as California, for example. So, you know, just, I would say not overdo it, you know, because you are just a junior faculty member. So if you come in with a huge attitude, I don't think people appreciate that too much. So,
That's great.
anything else?
I think that's good. So Dr. Villmoare has to run to another thing, so.
Well, if you have questions, if anyone has a question, I could take a question too. I don't know if anything comes to mind, but
When you got your offer, did they give you an actual contract and then you said, and you?
it was on the
Back to them
phone,
and
so I
do it?
with my department chair, she said, you know, you have this, and she said, you know, what do you think? And I said, I think, you know, 1.2 million, and she said, well, can we scale that back a little bit? You know, in other words, like, she just tells you, this is as far as we can go.
So it's more of a verbal.
Yeah, and I took a job in London, and there it was completely, the government sets that salary. They have no ability to negotiate anything, so it was just like, this is what it is, and shut up. And it wasn't enough, actually. I ultimately had to leave, because that's just what it was.
If you had did you have other interviews going on at the same time?
No, I did in the one in London. This one, I did have some other interviews. Some interviews, and I just have to tell you this, some interviews just not going to go well. I was interviewing with Idaho State, you know, and I'm a paleoanthropologist, and they asked me, they said, could you start a forensics program? And I said, did you read the CV? I mean, I didn't say that. I was like, you know, why don't you ask me to start a baseball program? Like, I'm not qualified for that. You know, I mean, it was ridiculous. So, and I was just kind of like, okay, so this isn't going to happen, and I'm not going to try to feel bad about it because, you know, they obviously want someone else who can do a forensics program. They have a bunch of kids coming in who've all seen CSI. So, I mean, there was nothing I could do about that. That's not who I am.
Right.
So, you know, yeah, and that's the other thing. You need to have a thick skin. You will send dozens, if not 100 applications, you know, and get a handful of bites because everybody applies for every position because you just never know. It's free to apply. You just got to try to tailor your letter, you know, as best you can. I had 3 interviews around the same time as this one, and this one was by far the best, you know, post for me, so I did this one. But, you know, there were others that were just obviously preposterous, so, you know, I don't even know why they call you. It's hard to know. Like, it's all, there's a lot of personality in this, you know, like, I mean, this is a human endeavor, right? So, it's up, does your personality, does it work? Do they like you? You know, if you're feeling crummy that day, and you sound listless, it's going to be bad. So, my advice is, be up, you know, because it really does matter. Like, they want to like you, right? And so you have to make it so that they can like you. Right?
So I'm going to let you run, and thank you, Dr.
Yeah, I hope that's
Villmoare.
somewhat useful.
Yep, thank you. So next, we thought we would sort of spread it around, given that we have in our audience people from different backgrounds and so forth. And yet, you know, there's similarities and differences in this process. Different fields, you'll see some differences in terms of the interview process. Do they fly you out for interviews? You know, how many go through Skype or phone interviews? Things like that can vary somewhat across fields. But at the same time, there are also a lot of similarities. So if you do an on-campus interview, there are a lot of similarities across departments and how this plays out. So now we're delighted to have out of nursing Nana Lukkahatai, who joined UNLV in what, 2014?
2014,
So you and Dr. Villmoare came in the same time?
At the same time, yes.
Same faculty orientation?
I don't know. I can't remember.
And you come out of nursing, so and your
Right.
background was getting a PhD in University of North Carolina in Chapel
Right.
Hill, postdocs in Queensland, Australia, also doing work at the National Institute for
Right.
Nursing Research
Right.
in Maryland.
So yeah, I have 2 job talk eventually. Not 2 job talk. It's just like it's a 2 phase of the job talk. If you're getting out of the graduate school and thinking about postdoc, you can actually asking about that as well because I have that experience and I go to the National Institute of Health, which actually it's quite an interesting experience for me.
So we'll turn it over to
Okay.
you to share your thoughts.
All right, so I have a little bit of PowerPoint here, so to keep me on track of what I'm going to be talking about. So actually, let's just start it. Anybody in the health science department? Okay. All right, so usually with academia, application processes were actually started from the application package. And I think Brian's talked about that a little bit about CV, cover letter. And you probably have to, especially if you apply for the academia positions, you probably have to think a little bit about the teaching philosophy, because that I learned it the hard way, because I get asked about what is your teaching philosophy on the phone. And I was stunned because I was trained as a researcher and I thought that I'd apply for the position as a nurse researcher. So they asked me about what is your teaching philosophy. Let me think about that. I was just like squeezing around. So, all right, that's the kind of thing that you might get asked. So another thing is statement of research interest, especially if you apply for any research positions, if you are really interested in research. So that would be a key thing that you'll be interested. They will ask you about what do you plan to do in the university. That's basically. And also another thing that actually people usually don't talk about it that much, but I found it very useful because that's how I successfully negotiated the position here at UNLV, is to actually estimate your budget. There would be a question asked during your interview process, either on the phone interview or the campus interview. They will ask you what you think it will be for you to be successful. So that's actually, it's a money talk. So you're going to actually have to think, okay, minimum requirement for me. And then you negotiate it a little bit higher than you thought what you expect for you to be successful. My area is in biomarker discovery. So it's actually like it's required a little bit of lab space. And also some of the GA graduate assistants and the other things. So that's actually the kind of thing that I was thinking about. And actually, like, you know, in order for doing that, especially if you're fresh out from your graduate school, is that you never actually think that much because your professor has all of the equipment for you. But thinking about you moving to the new places, I'm moving far away from DC to here. It's just like it's a fresh started. And you cannot just expect, hey, they have a lab, I can actually just go into their lab and ask to use the equipment, because that actually is not what happened. So you probably have to negotiate a little bit about what equipment that you think it's gonna be needed for your research. And also list of your reference. It's vary from university to university, because when I'm doing the application, I did about 5-7 university that I applied for, and I landed about 4 campus visit. I'll tell you about that experience eventually. Some of the school will ask you to submit the letter of reference, like 2 letters up front when you submit your package. Some will actually, and then they'll make a call to 3 additional reference. That's very intense. That's the most intense interview I ever been with. It's a tier 1 university. So that's actually what happened, but the most common reference that they're going to need is about 2 to 3 reference, and they usually will not contact your referees until you pass all of the interview to contact the person that you listed. So that actually is the beginning. So if you have a very impressive package, this is what's going to happen. They're going to actually email you, and they're going to say, we want to actually do the phone screening interview. So it's again, some interview is actually like very easy, they're very friendly. Some are actually asking to do the Skype. And you just actually have to make your environment neat and nice to make sure that it's actually look nice on the camera. Some are actually sending you a set of questions for you to be prepared to talk, and they say, hey, I have 20 minutes, and you actually have to answer all of these questions. So you actually know ahead of time, but you need to condense what you're going to be answering all of that. And this is actually the example from one of the interview that I have. They sent me a set of questions, and all these, I need to talk about all these within 20 minutes. Actually, it's kind of crazy. It's nerve-wracking for me, because the first question is actually talking about how do you feel that you fit with the school. So you actually have to study everything about the school and fit your qualification with the school, and also short-term, middle-term, long-term. Wow, that would take days, right? And actually, what do you feel here? What do you feel you need to be successful here? And they're actually talking about who in the campus, in the state, in the national, do you consider that you can work interdisciplinary, especially in nursing. Interdisciplinary is huge. It's not just people that you can work with the people in nursing, you actually have to work with the other people too. So that's the kind of things that probably, I'm not sure about the other disciplinary, but this is actually very big, especially with the health department. So what kind of work? Another question that actually it's a kind of things that you actually have to think, because you don't want to oversell yourself. You want to say good thing about yourself, but at the same time you don't want to brag. So they're actually asking, can you describe your most impactful research and how did you disseminate it, that finding? It's not just discovery the biomarker. They will ask you how the biomarker going to help in nursing. How are you going to improve nursing or health of the people in the field? So that's a kind of question. So you get asked, and what do you think is the greatest challenge to the School of Nursing related to research and teaching in the next decade? This is actually scare me the most, because the thing is, you don't want to say bad thing about the school, but at the same time, you want to actually be smart and thinking about the future. So they actually evaluated you everything about that. And this is 20 minutes. It's kind of like, you speak and speak and speak and you not read at all. It's just like, okay, 20 minutes, done. So that's actually is one of the most intense phone interview. Another phone interview is actually like asking about that teaching philosophy that I was talking about. And it was flipped. I thought, well, they're not going to ask me for the campus visit, but they do. That's interesting. But it's a kind of question that actually would throw at you without you even think about it. So, how to prepare after your phone interview? There is actually 2 events that can actually happen to you. They're going to send you a letter and say, oh, you're great, your qualification is great, but we don't think you fit with the school. That's actually is one thing that can actually happen. Second thing that can actually happen is they're going to actually send you an email. If you get an email, be happy. Because they're going to send you an email and say, we would like to invite you for the campus visit. That's when the big red flag come out, and it's just like, okay, I'm gonna actually have to be prepared, and a lot of things going on. And this is a great sessions, because I never actually have these sessions when I'm applying for the job. So what I do is I'm researching, I'm looking at the YouTube of what job interview will look like. So one of the key things that I found and learned from my own experience is actually you need to study. You need to study the setting. You need to study your school. How many of you applied for the job already? You planning to, right? So some of you probably looking at several universities. You probably like flying out your applications several places. You probably get interview after interview after interview if your application package is actually that good. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna actually have to make sure that you focus, because it can be confusing. You can probably confuse one university with another university. So make sure that you actually start from the vision and the mission of the university. One of the key questions that I got asked here at UNLV is actually, why UNLV? So you're gonna actually start like, okay, the visions of the university is, and this is actually something that I think it fit with my personal goal. So you actually have to start with that, because it's always get to people all the time. They impress you because you study them. It's not like, hey, I'm just doing a job, I just want a job. Of course you want a job, but you also want to impress them that you're interested in them. You pay attention of what they want and what they need and what they go and what they want to be in the future as well. Another thing that actually is my big mistake is you need to review the job descriptions of the position that you apply for. And also, what was expected from you. Because actually if you apply, let's say if you apply for the teaching institute or you apply for the research institute, that's another thing that you need to be considered. The reason being is actually I learned it the hard way, because I was actually looking for the 12-month contract job. And I was saying, there was like, why, university. And I said, oh, I'm looking for these because I think it's great. And then I forgot. They actually, oh, did you know that the position that you apply for is actually 9-month contract? Now you can guess that I'm not landing that job, right? So that actually you need to be very careful. Okay, so you need to remember that what is a job descriptions and search for the expert and possible mentor. Now, any one of you actually graduated your PhD? Every one of you graduated a PhD, right?
Current grad students, really. Right?
Currently.
Okay, so the thing with, I don't know about the other department, but for the health, like the health science, we actually have to apply for the NIH grant. One of the key with the NIH grant, if you graduated from like fresh out and you get landed your first academia, is you will be required, especially if you are in the research position, you'll be required to submit your grant. So with the grant, one of the key thing is actually the early developing career is the K award. Have you familiar? So the K award, it actually you would need a mentor, and that main mentor need to be within the campus. Another requirement for that mentor is that they need to be successful in terms of obtaining the big grant like the RO1. So you need to make sure that if you want to blossom in research area, that's what you need to look for, and actually mark that down and list that person, and possibly request a meeting or send the email to that person ahead of time and say, I'm actually having a job interview with this university, I'm interested to go in and talk to you. Have your plan ready, have a little bit of your idea of the research ready of what you're going to do. There is actually a lot of K grant mechanism like K1, K99, what do you want to do, right? So all of those is actually a beginning of your applications. Also, research diagrams and research area as well. You need to fit. Brian just talked about that. You need to fit your research area with whatever actually happened in the university. I don't think anybody would apply to the university that doesn't have the area that you're interested in. It's similar to when you apply for the graduate school as well. You need to locate it. Your faculty need to locate it, their research area, right? So, okay. Another thing that actually I learned it the hard way too is to actually because you write the CV, you submit it too many times, you actually make an adjustment to from place to place, and then your publication, you wrote it a couple years ago, and then you forgot about it. This is what you're gonna get asked when you go to the campus visit, because they're gonna actually, your CV gonna be what you study, they study about you. So they're gonna ask you, oh, you have a publication about these, can you tell me a little bit about these study that you were doing? So, make sure that you actually read a little bit and make sure that you're up to date about those area of the study too. Let's say, my example is actually I discovered the polypoprotein E, which actually one of the biomarker, and then there is actually an upcoming of these research, and actually it's expanding. So what I did is I actually review what I found, and then they got asked, it's, you never know, they actually got asked, what is the most current status of these discovery. So actually, luckily I prepared, so that's good. And then research your interviewer and their research program. You actually have to Google who you're gonna be meeting with. I actually have an example of these campus visit schedule, because this interview, it can range from 6 hours to 2 days. I'm serious, we're talking about 2 days interview. This is actually what happened. This is day one. I'm flying far away. It's actually from one place to another place. So what they're gonna do, if you apply for the tier 1 university, the very top 50 university, this is what they're gonna do. They're gonna have someone pick you up from the airport. So I landed at 2 p.m. and this is actually like a meeting, the director, the dean, and everything. And I don't know if it's specifically for just nursing school, but they go with you for dinner. They go with you for breakfast. So actually they're gonna have someone with you in the breakfast. Lunch, they're gonna have lunch with you, they're gonna have dinner with you. So, manner in the dining table also matter. Also, another thing that actually is the key is, I think what they want to see is they want to see how you handle yourself under stress. Because on your first day, they're not going to put you into your presentation yet. You've been practice, and you thought, wow, okay, if I land it, I'm going to actually get it over with and it's done. That's usually not what happened. They're going to actually put you in the second day. And what's going to happen is actually you're going to meet people and meet people and meet people. And you're going to actually like being very stressed because each of those people, you're going to need to prepare what their interest and how you're going to actually make sure that your interest is consistent with what their interest and what kind of topic that you're going to be talking about. So you're meeting like 1 hour and then just a little break, another hour, and then hour after hour and after hour, and you have someone that walk with you for the, I don't know, that some school do, some school you actually have to figure out. Another thing is actually one of the key things that I'm going to be talking later is about how you dress and your shoes. Shoes is your best friends. Because you don't want to get, the thing especially if you like ladies, you don't want to be in the high heel and walking because some of the campus is actually like it's far away. And you don't want to be crappy as well. You want to be nice, you want to be smiling, and you cannot do that if your feet hurt, right? So actually that's what happened to me for this one. This is actually very intense. And the second day is actually start at 8:10. But actually like, it's early. Someone coming in and have breakfast with me, taking me to the school, and then have a little break, and then here, the presentation is in the afternoon. So by the time that you go to the presentation, you already forget what I'm going to be saying. But eventually that's not going to happen. It's usually is your adrenaline. So if you actually prepare really well, you have nothing to worry about. So and then meeting after meeting, and then they send you off to your home. You're just done. That's actually what the job interview is actually happen. So this is actually the example. Another thing that I'm gonna be I'll be talking later. So when you do your interview, when you actually get that intense schedule, is actually you would be at some point being like familiar and being kidding it off with some of the people that having dinner with you. Oh, another thing. What are you going to do if you actually having dinner? Would you have a wine in dinners, or should you actually not having a wine? Having alcohol, or should you not? That's the question though. I think based on my personal experience, I usually don't. I usually drink a lot too, but I feel like, okay, all right, if I drink, I tend to lose myself. So I need to be a little bit professional as well. My manner need to be intact. And also, I need to be friendly, but at the same time, do not over friendly. Another key thing that you actually have to be careful, because when you actually like talking, you tend to ask, how is the department? What is the politics in the department? Do not ask about that, because that actually is the big no-no. It's, because I was actually like over here some of the search committee that were talking, and they will always, in the next morning when you come in for the presentation, they're always gonna ask, how was the candidates? And they're gonna actually, that candidates were actually asking about politics, and how could they ask about that? It's not an appropriate question that you should ask. And also asking about the other candidates. You dying to know how many candidates for these positions, but you shouldn't be asking about that. And also, there is actually, there is a suggestion that you do not give away your personal life and the relationship status and everything else. But eventually these would get asked. It would be one of the breaking point as well, especially if you actually like flying, like me flying from DC to here. They're gonna ask, are you married? Do you have kids? What is the job of your husband? Can he move with you? That's a breaking point. So prepare the answer for that. I don't know, it's really depends on each and every one, but like my husband is great, he can move with me everywhere, so that's a plus for me. So that's good.
I will say on that issue, there are also
Right.
legal boundaries to those things.
Yeah.
So on search committees, we're not allowed to ask those things.
Right.
De facto, some places they do, but
Right.
that's probably surpassing boundaries that shouldn't
Right,
be.
right.
And
So-
and it's perfectly fine for you to say
Mhm.
that this is not an appropriate question, or you don't feel
Right.
comfortable responding to some of these.
Right, but actually, I think that actually happened to me and a friends from NIH as well that were talking about these because they were considering about moving far away from place to place. So they were actually looking at the flexibility of how easy that you would consider the positions. That's the kind of thing. And you can actually always saying that, oh, okay, I'm not comfortable answer these questions. But it's illegal to ask, but eventually you probably will get asked. That actually is a question that I got asked in several places because they were concerned whether or not I'll be able to move. That's actually is a key thing. So that actually is something. So you usually will not at dinner, at when you meet with the search committee, you usually do not just initiate the conversations, but you might get asked for those questions. So another thing is actually practice and practice and practice. Okay, so I think it's actually a very great idea. As a postdoctoral fellow at NIH, we do preparations for these job presentation. So what we do is we actually we have a room full of the scientists to actually listen to what we actually will be giving presentation for our job talk. So the presentations, if we have time, I can actually show you an example of my job talk as well. What I usually do for my job talk is actually starting from where I am, why I am interested in what I am interested in, and the progress of my work. Because sometimes talking about your great discovery, it's great, but some of your work it's not just that great discovery. They actually some of the thing is actually the ongoing process, and you actually working so hard to get these far. So you probably want to highlight those as well, and always finish with what you want to do and what is your plan for your future. And it would be great if you can actually these you would highlight, these would fit well with the school vision and mission. That would actually be a plus for your job talk as well. So it usually would take about 30 to 40 minutes presentation. So again, this is a housekeeping that you need to, you probably think, hey, this is the least of what I would be concerned. The job talk would be a big thing. But eventually, because you need to handle yourself throughout 6 hours, it's not that bad. 2 days, that's a lot of work. So you actually need to study what the weather will look like. If you go to Cleveland, and it's going to be snowing a lot. If you go to Las Vegas, is it gonna be hot or is it gonna be cold? Don't expect Las Vegas is gonna be hot. And then you actually you pack light, but eventually when you get here, it's very cold. So make sure you study the weather, prepare the clothes, personal item, make sure that you bring all the things that you need. Especially ladies, sometimes you miss one of those things that you will lose your self-confidence the whole day. You actually have to be worried about that. Another thing is actually always your business card and CV. Prepare that and make sure that you have it with you. Bring a copy of your schedule. That actually is a key thing as well, because you need to make sure. Another thing that I actually do for myself is I actually make a note of what, like each and every one of the person that I'm gonna be meeting with. I'm gonna actually writing what they interest, what is their grant, what is their focus, what kind of course that they teach. So those are the kind of things that I actually make a note for myself on the schedule. So when I meet with the person, I'll see, you will see their face from the university website already. So usually it's not gonna be new to you. So be healthy and well rested. Now, if you're thinking about moving like from the east to the west or the west to the east, that is actually a little bit tricky because of the time zone. Make sure you set the alarm clock because you don't want to miss your interview. And actually, like in different time zones, it's pretty challenging as well. I used to like fly from here to the East Coast, and it's actually like, it's a time difference and you're not awake yet. And you actually have to go to the interview already. You need to make sure that you prepare for that as well. And be your professional. Be a version of your professional. You want to be yourself because they already like you based on your package that you submitted, based on your phone interview. They already like you. They already want you. So you want to be yourself, but at the same time, you want to be professional as well, okay? And actually, this is something that I always did, is actually do, after the phone interview or campus visit, even if it's go well or not go well, I usually will send a thank you notes to each and every one of my interviewer. The reason being is you don't want to burn the bridge. Even though you don't land the job, you want to make sure that you're nice enough to actually acknowledge that time and the conversation. Who knows? In the future, you might end up doing the research collaboration with them in the future. So you don't want to, hey, I don't get a job, so I'm not going to know this person anymore. So, it's a good networking with a job interview. So when you landed a job, this is actually what happened after the campus visit. It usually will take about 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, not more than a month. If they really like you, they will offer you right on the spot. That's what usually gonna happen. But if it's not, if they have other candidates, they might say, hey, you'll hear from us. So it's gonna be taking about 2-3 weeks, or if it takes longer, you might not get this job, even though the interview going really well. Especially one of the key things that I found from my job interview is that if other candidates already have a funding with them, they tend to get that job in the academia because the funding is actually very difficult if you carry the funding with you. If you are in the graduate school thinking, if you toward the end of your PhD program, thinking about the K-99 or the kangaroo grants, I'm not sure about the other disciplinary, but that's actually grants that you actually will do postdoc, and also in combination that you're going to move forward to do your ROO, which actually is the actual grant money. So if you get the job offer, they usually will call you. They'll say, hey, we want to schedule a phone conversation with you. Actually, I have two experience that are actually very interesting. One is actually like they got to offer a job. Another one they say, we just want to explain why we don't want you. So it's kind of like, that's interesting. I got a letter that they say, oh, we don't think you fit with the school. We regret you actually have an exceptional qualification, but we don't, well, you're not fit with the school. But then I say, oh, thank you, everything. And then the dean sent me an email and say, can we have a phone conversation? I say, okay. Well, I was just like interested of what they're gonna say, right? So they say, well, okay, this is the reason why we didn't give you a job. That's actually is good because now it's a reflection of yourself. You probably would need to know everything about you, especially if you apply for the job, like several jobs at the same time. But they are actually like, they are some of the good news phone call that you actually get a phone call. They're gonna actually send you an email and we want to schedule a phone like, the phone conversation with you. So they're gonna actually call you. This is actually what happened with the UNLV. I got the phone call. But some of the university, they're not. They actually will send you a letter and say, congratulations, we want you in our school. So this is actually what's gonna happen. They're gonna tell you how much they're gonna give and what kind of positions. Either it is a tenure track, if it is the teaching job. So that's actually what they're gonna do. But after that, they're gonna actually ask you. You usually this is what's gonna happen. When you get the job, you say yes, and you're gonna actually tend to say yes right away on your phone. But hey, that's actually is something that you probably have to wait a little bit and say thank you for the offer. I will consider it. Step back a little bit and then take a look at that and look at the offer. One of the key that you need to consider is the teaching loads and the job assignments. Because the thing is, actually, because for me, I can only speak for me, this is actually the research position. So you need to make sure that with the teaching loads and your time for research is actually you need to make sure that you have time for research. Now, this is the thing that I don't think about when I got the job offer. Because you actually fresh out and it's like, hey, teaching 3 credit, that wouldn't be so bad. It's just like the student, it's not like 100 in the classroom. Like 6 credits, well, that would be okay. But eventually you need to remember that actually that 6 credits take a lot of time or 3 credits take a lot of time. That actually that I learned that the hard way after I got the job. So another thing is actually salary, benefit, retirements, and health insurance. Moving costs, they usually will tell you upfront how much they're gonna reimburse for you moving. Okay, GA support, whether or not they're gonna give you a GA. If you give you a lot of teaching loads, they usually will give you a GA support. And office, lab, equipment, lab space, and startup cost. Usually this is when the negotiation happen. Because for the startup, this is what happened to me. They will say, what do you need for your startup? How much do you need? So this is actually when the budget come into play, that you're gonna actually have to list everything that you need in order for you to be successful, especially if you're a researcher. So you actually have to list all of those. Some of you might not I'm not thinking about that yet. They're gonna actually start you with the very minimum startup fund. But those startup fund is actually will be beneficial for you when you start the job. And also another thing is, one of the key things with the startup fund is always ask questions. After the negotiated amount, ask the durations. Because this is what's usually happen. If they're gonna actually give you just the academic year, right? So if it actually hit to the certain point, those money gone. You need to make sure that you use the money, use up all the money. Okay, so let me just tell you a little bit about my experience. I got one job offer. This is what happened to me. I got one job offer. I didn't say yes right away. I also do another interview for another school, so I get 2 job offer at the same time. So what I do is this is what happened, and I'm flattered eventually. I just want to brag about it. So it's just like I got 2 job offer, and the thing is I actually answered yes to one place, and another place is actually trying to fight for it. They're trying to negotiate. So they actually, I just told the dean from the other school and say, I'm sorry, I just accept the offer from the other school. The usual situation is they're gonna, okay, wish you luck and everything else. But this is actually very interesting because another school was just like, we want another opportunity for you to visit the school for the second time to meet all the people that will actually help you launch your project. So, I shouldn't go back the second time. This is my recommendation because it's drama. Because the thing is actually it's gonna be so hard to say no, because they actually invite you the second time. They pay for everything. They fly you. They actually pay for your meal. They have someone picking you up. So they fly me the second time, and they ask me, what is the other university offer. So they actually like, okay, we're gonna match these, we're gonna actually give you these and these and these and these. So that actually is the beauty of negotiation when you land the job. And if your package is really good, if your interview going really well, and if you're nice enough and they like you. So that's what happened. After you land the job, one of the key things that usually happen, that actually happened to me when I go to the interview, is I always have a sense that I wasn't good enough. I always have a sense that I was a graduate student. I was a fellow. So when I go in, I was like, negotiate? No, probably not. I'm probably not that good. But remember, you are no longer graduate students. They like you from your CV. They like you from your cover letter already. So you need to feel that you're a professional, and you need to do it like that. You need to be proud of yourself. You are not a student anymore. And when you land a job, one of the things that I think NIH hasn't prepared us for is to actually have that kind of sense that we actually, like, especially probably Asian culture as well, that we are not, we do not need mentor, we do not need to be under someone all the time. We need to handle ourselves now, and we need to grow up now. So actually be confident. Another thing is actually like something that I learned, pay attention to the university and department policy. This is what usually happened to a lot of graduate students that actually landed the job in the academia. We actually like, policy, okay, all right, the ton of paperwork and tons of language, you don't want to read it, but eventually you want to study those policy because it involves your professional developments and everything else. Research, teaching, and service. This is something that you need to be involved with. So you cannot just say, hey, I want to be a researcher, so I'm going to just do research. You need to teach, and also you need to do service as well. Be flexible. Okay, so you need to be friendly, you need to make sure that you're flexible, but at the same time, protect your time because your tenure clock is actually start right away. Now, another thing that I learned the hard way, I started in here at UNLV in 2014, and this is actually what happened to me. Yay! I landed a job in the university, right? I wanted to start it right away. I started in March, and March is actually toward the end of like spring semester. Your tenure clock is actually go all the way back to the beginning of the academic year. It's actually go all the way back, so you lose that 6-7 months. So now I'm actually in the third year of my tenure track already, and I'm actually have to submit my mid-tenure package this year. So for that, actually another thing is actually the requirement for your publication. If you lose, even though you lose that, you cannot just negotiate and say, hey, I lose 7 months of my time, so can I count publication that actually published before that? No, you can't. It's gonna actually start right when you started, so you lose that 7 months. Even if you have like 3 or 4 publications, you lose that 3 or 4 publications already. So be careful. When you start, you want to start on like maybe August, or maybe like at the very beginning of your of the semester. That actually is suggestion I learned the hard way here. But I'm actually lucky because I actually do a lot. I like consistently publish, so that's good. So, and another thing is actually one of the things that I wasn't actually experienced here at UNLV, but I experienced at somewhere else, is actually you have a session with the graduate students when you do the interview. Now, the graduate students meeting can break your interview. It doesn't matter how your job talk go. It doesn't matter how your other interview go. If their students don't like you, that can break your job interview as well. So make sure you're nice enough and be considered, especially if you're fresh out from your graduate school. You need to make sure that you understand them and talking to them in a way that you respect them as well, because their input can be really important to the decision making of the administrative. So, hooray!
Well, thank you,
Okay.
Dr. Lukkahatai. So we still have plenty of time, and we can always wrap up earlier if we are done, but I thought what we do is just open up for questions. So, you've heard from this process of going through things in nursing, and with Dr. Villmoare, and again, I was part of the search committee and under which he was hired, but I've been on several others too in anthropology here at UNLV. Plus, way back when I was a grad student, watching candidates come in to the department where I was as a grad student interviewing for jobs, which was, I had less info, but
Right.
it also validated that we were talking among ourselves, and
Right.
faculty asked for our input as grad students in that process. But the forum's really open now at this point for questions you may have about any of this process.
I actually am Brett Levner. I was just like,
Oh.
but I came from my class.
Oh, I'm
I was
sorry.
a little bit late. I only have. I could add a little
Come-
bit, or I could
absolutely,
not. If there's time,
absolutely.
if there's not, I don't have to.
And I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were
Most
here.
people don't know I'm a woman, so that's the other thing. 'Cause my name is Brett.
So this is further exciting. So this further broadens the scope. So we'll now hear from someone from film.
I'll
So-
just talk briefly
Ms.
because
Levner,
you
and
did
I'll-
such a wonderful job. I'll just talk very briefly.
And I'll just say, as I was looking up your profile, part of the reason I asked you is just, not that I would ever have any talent for film. If you have any questions about film, commercials, movies, etc., and I saw one of your highlights was, we've all been to the movie theater and seen the Coca-Cola contest for students, is that right? And Ms. Levner won one of those, believe it or not. So among many, many highlights of her career. But coming out of film, you can talk us through a process by which you two landed your position here at UNLV, or just this general process?
Sure.
As well?
And I apologize for being late. I had a class at 1 o'clock, so I left early because I wanted to come talk to you guys because I actually am an MFA. I'm not a PhD. I'm in the arts. And that's actually considered, there is no PhD in film production. MFA is the terminal, is the, final degree. So I don't know if any of you guys are MFAs or masters, but it's a little bit different because I didn't come from graduate school into academia. I worked for 10 years in film and television production and then transitioned to academia. And so it was very foreign to me and I had no idea what to expect and really no one to ask because none of my friends were professors, they're all filmmakers. So I kind of came to it by default in terms of like what I was doing right and what I was doing wrong. But I did go on a series of interviews, probably 9 interviews over the course of several years. Like I took a job and then I actually transitioned from one to another. And I made a lot of mistakes. So I thought I'd tell you some of my experience so that way you don't make mistakes. The first thing would be, again, I'm just reiterating a lot from the great presentation before, but the importance of your cover letter and your CV. And I actually never had a CV before because we used a different type of resume template when we you apply for non-academic jobs. But that's very important. I asked a couple of my former professors, could I get an example of their CV, and I kind of, structured it similarly. Again, your cover letter as well, if you can try to create a template and then each time you want to kind of tailor it for the specific job, integrating keywords into that cover letter to reflect your ability to fulfill that job, that position. Your teaching philosophy as well. For me, it was work examples. I don't publish, I make films, and I work, so I have to provide a website or a portal for them to watch examples of my work. Again, if you're in the arts, a similar kind of professional site, not just like a YouTube, but a website for them to watch your work. And then last, again, are your references. And if you're going, the thing is hard with references because sometimes I applied for multiple jobs over several years, you have to update those references, and do you want to ask the same people each time? And it is sort of a responsibility because every time you apply for a job, they have to upload their reference online for you, and how much can you ask that person to do, that mentor to do that for you? And sometimes I felt guilty. After 2 years, I'd be like, ask a new reference or a more up-to-date reference, so I wouldn't kind of like, burn that bridge or ask for too much, I guess is sort of what I'm saying. Because it is a commitment on their side. And sometimes a reference, in order to, like, let's say, I've had some references where I know are extremely busy, filmmakers and professors, and they would ask me, could you write the first draft of your reference for me? And then they would tweak it, and that allows them, you could offer to do that as well, because knowing that they're limited with their time, that would help them in the process. Plus, you can allow them to know what you're working on, where they don't have to do so much of that research for you. But again, you would have that letter of reference ready for you. Okay, and then you'd already spoken to the interviews. Okay, then there's the phone interview or Skype interview. This is a very strange situation because sometimes you'll do the Skype interview, which I hate the worst because I think it's way more awkward than the phone interview. I've had a situation where this one school, it was like out of a movie. There was like 3 professors, one had a cat that was stroking. I swear to God, one was like a guy with a tweed blazer with a pipe. And there was a woman with like a bob and like black glasses, very like, you know, they were from San Francisco and they were very, and it was just so intimidating, it was awkward and weird. I prefer the phone interview because you can't see who you're talking to, but you don't have a choice, so you gotta do what you gotta do. Make sure your Skype is all set up beforehand, prepared, there's no like, again, as you said about the time change, oh my God, I screwed that up once. Make sure your time change is all set and you verify the time is East Coast, West Coast time before you commit. But again, you'll see that there's the same questions get asked and you'll become familiar with them. And one of them, again, is your work, your previous teaching experience, but what are you going to bring to this university? And you have to look and see, is it a public university, is it a private university, is it a community college, is it for-profit, non-for-profit? What is your experience be, and what is, you know, how are you going to, you know, work into that scenario? Second, who are their students? You know, it's very different when you're working in a very diverse campus versus a non-diverse campus versus, you know, are your students regional, you know, what's the story? And you have to be aware of that and how you're going to be able to interact with the inner city kids, like how you're going to be able to interact in the environment, what are your experience levels and so forth. I find they ask that a lot. Okay. And again, of course, research your facility or the location that you're going to. And also they're going to ask you, let's say, for sometimes I've been in a job and I applied for another job, why you're leaving that job. But you don't want to say anything negative because you don't want to screw up your last job. So you have to find a way, you know, to say it so that, you know, maybe you're looking to relocate to be near family, to be near a bigger city, more opportunities for your students. Say it in a way so you never want to burn a bridge. And don't be intimidated if you have a job and you want to apply for another job. You're allowed to. I used to be so nervous in my department. Would find out there's nothing wrong with it. You should be interviewing. It's always good to see what's out there. And if there's a better opportunity, it could afford you better research opportunities or higher your position. If you're non-tenure track and you want a tenure track position, there's nothing wrong with interviewing. You'll be very surprised to see that many people are doing it as well. Okay, let's say you get to the campus tour. Okay, so this can range, again, like saying from 1 day to 2 full days. And I think it's, from looking back at the ones that I got the job offers and ones that I didn't. And sometimes it'd be like, wow, I nailed that, but I wouldn't get it. Or sometimes it'd be like, that was just horrible. And I would get an offer. But I think the one thing that consistently I looked at was that professional. They're not your friends, really. Like, don't cross over into being like, talking about, like, yes, you make small talk for sure, because you're going to be driving from the airport, you're going to be driving to the, walking around campus, but I think keep it on the professional level, professional small talk. When you get too personal, they're not really your friends, you know what I'm saying? When I've removed myself and kept it more professional, which I did later on in the interview processes, that's when I think I was most successful. So usually you'll go and you'll get like a campus tour. Sometimes they're nice and they'll like even drive you around the city a little bit and show you where you could potentially live, and like you have to research and see can you realistically afford to live there. That's the other thing. I had some job offers in New York City and I was like, do I really want to go to New York City and pay that? So you can do some research on Craigslist for jobs or for you know, housing, and see can you really afford to live in that place. After you do like a campus tour, you'll do your like, you know, either during that period of time, you'll have a lecture where you prepare that beforehand. Make sure you find out what the requirements are in terms of you're going to use a PowerPoint, make sure your computer's charged. Like I showed clips, so I want to make sure all that stuff is set up beforehand so there's no like, you know, freak out moment. Are you going to bring a clicker, bring your own clicker, batteries for that, so forth and so on. Just so that's all set up and you won't like freak out and not have all your materials in place. Back everything up onto a flash drive or whatever, so you have it. Again, engage the students, get to know the students, because that's who you're going to be, you know, really basing your experiences on? You know, can you interact with them? Do they like you? So I usually kind of have to have like, I have little small conversations, you know, I like to keep it a little light and fun, playful, you know, like, you know, have a conversation, engage them in some kind of questions and answer, and not just do a lecture, a straight up lecture. I like to kind of engage the classroom in conversation to kind of show that I can do that as well as lecture. But that might just because I'm in the arts. And then you'll go to these like weird meals, like you'll meet all these different people, and sometimes the meals are awkward and like long, but you have to be able to handle them all. You know, they're like it's so fun. Like I went to one in Connecticut, and they're all like very, you know, conservative and a certain type. You know, I like to, because I'm a filmmaker, I have to break it down into stereotypes. But you have to kind of like be able to flow with it. Or I did one, I don't know where else, I went to one in Nashville, and you got to flow with that kind of environment. And I like just to ask about their experiences and keep it friendly and kind of inquire about what they like, you know, about their students, but also what goes on in the community, and kind of ask them questions as well, and engage them. But you're gonna, you know, just this all across the board kind of scenarios that you have to be able to flow with. And so you have to really be on from the moment you get off the plane until you leave. And it's exhausting, but you can do it. Just get ready and be prepared to be on. And be comfortable. Again, like what you're wearing is very important. Be comfortable, have the materials you need with you. If you need your coffee, you need your caffeine, pack your little bag if you need snacks along the way. Be prepared to do 1 or 2 days of full-on being on social and, you know, upbeat and engaging and asking questions and so forth. And again, definitely research the people you're going to be hanging out with. What is, you know, what films have they made? Where are they from? Where have they taught? You know, stuff like that. What else? Okay, What was this? Oh, you're going to meet with the dean. You're going to sit down and meet with the dean of this, you know, your school. Usually they like have a spiel, I've noticed, and you kind of just listen and kind of take it in. But this was a very interesting moment because actually I applied for a job. I was already tenure track at one school, and I was applying for another job that was tenure track. And this is where she revealed to me that I would have to start all over again, that I could not retain the years I had put into my one tenure track job. They did not tell me that. The other professors from faculty did not tell me that in the interview. So that's where, and then I realized at that moment that there was no point, but oh well. But that was a very interesting moment. So that's something you want to be aware of, that until you, if you're going to transition in the middle of your tenure track, you have to make sure you could either, so if you put 4 years in, are you going to redo and start from scratch? And maybe it would make sense depending on, you know, the job offer, but maybe it wouldn't. So you're going to have to think about that. And again, questions you can ask, like what's your workload, what are the benefits, is it tenure, and so forth and so on. Okay, one thing I did not know you're not supposed to do is you're not supposed to talk money at all during the interview process. So how do you know how much they're offering? Hopefully they listed it on the job offer, you know, on the by the way, Chronicle of Higher Education and Higher Ed Jobs is 2 great resources for looking for jobs. But if they didn't put the range, you have no idea really like how much they're going to offer. And I'm not a researcher, so I'm looking for a salary. So I don't know, but you're not allowed to ask these questions, which I didn't know. But so you have to play along, and so it's kind of strange. But anyway, eventually, let's say you do get an offer, and they do call you, and they say want to arrange a meeting on the phone. So you call them, and they give you the offer. Okay, my, again, reaction would be don't say yes right away. Say thank you so much for the offer, I need a moment to think it over, or talk it over with my spouse, whatever it is, and then you'll get back to them. Now, if you're at another university, you can utilize this opportunity to try to increase your current salary. This is also something that is done. And you can say, look, I just got an offer, they want to pay me this, if it's more money. And you can say, would you be able to match that or raise my current salary? That's also something you do negotiation-wise. You also have to negotiate with your current job. I always, you know, oh, thank you, I'll take whatever I'm given. No, you have to negotiate. And that's always hard, and we talk about this in the Women's Council, especially sometimes with females, we think, oh, we should take what we're given. No, you have to negotiate and make sure you're getting the best offer you can get. And there's actually some resources they provide through the Women's Council here at UNLV as to how to negotiate and get, you know, for yourself. Okay. The other thing you should be prepared of is sometimes when you go on these campus interviews, they're going to ask you to pay for your air ticket, and then you'll get reimbursed after the fact, which I think is ridiculous. But just be prepared for that. That's a possibility. And then last but not least, I think it's just a fun experience. And now I'm on a search committee here, so it's kind of interesting to see the opposite end of it. But overall, it was kind of like a fun experience. I got to kind of travel and see a lot of different parts of the country, so you get to get exposed to that. I would encourage yourself when you do go there to really walk around and think, can I really live here? Because sometimes I would go to these small towns and be like, I don't know if I really live here. You really have to realize, is that where you see yourself? Could you have a life there? Could you afford it? Is it going to be something that makes sense for you long term? So also quality of life and all that sort of stuff should be taken into consideration. Do you want to live in a big city? Do you want to live in a small town? Do you want to live rural? Do you want to live urban? Those are choices, because you also want to think about your life as well when considering opportunities. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you. So we do still have time for questions. So any things that are on your mind, and I saw as far as questions asked of you, none of you are currently applying or scheduling interviews on with Skype phone, Skype conversations right now or so forth, but maybe next year this is you. So anything on your distant horizons you want to raise with our speakers today?
So, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead. So a question about the Skype. So for Skype interviews, you have the screen of your PowerPoint behind you, and you're talking into the Skype. Is that how those are generally set up, or?
I don't know about you, but for me, it's actually, it's not. It's similar to the phone interview. They're gonna actually have a panel, but I think the reason behind Skyping is probably they want to see you, and they want you to see your gestures and everything else. So that's actually basically what I think they were asking to do. It's similar to the phone interview, so they're gonna asking questions, but always one of the key things that they're gonna actually ask at the end of those sessions is what kind of questions do you have for us. One of the things that I forgot to mention is you should prepare to ask questions, because actually that show that you are interested in the positions. It's not just I don't have it. Usually, because I'm in the search committee as well, usually some of the candidates didn't ask questions, and I feel like, did we do that good of a job that you don't have any questions for? So, you should actually asking. Another thing that you actually have to look at as well, you probably can ask what is the opportunity if you apply for research positions, what is the opportunity of research, what is the opportunity of the collaboration, especially if your interest is very specific like me, I'm interested in cancer patients. So just okay, do we have cancer center around the area? Do the school have the connection with any of these populations? So that's sort of thing that you cannot really search it out from the internet. I think Brian touched on that a little bit about you need to actually ask questions that probably is not available. If you actually ask too easy of the question, what is the mission of the school? Then they're gonna actually flip on you again. It's just why didn't you actually study us at all? So you actually it's. So that actually basically is a Skype Skype's experience for me, but I don't know what you.
It was just basically like the Skype phone interview. It's just like you're sitting at your desk and you're just looking at 3 or 4 people, and each one's asking a certain number of questions, and you have to make sure that you have not something embarrassing in the background, or lock your dog up because my dog started crying. Your phone buzzer's off. Things like that.
And make sure that your office, if you actually have the Skype interview at your office, all of your office is neat and nice. Make sure that when you actually on the camera, whatever within the camera range is actually neat.
And check it out beforehand. Check out the sound and make sure that you're going to be audible and you can hear them as well. You said you brought up your dog, but also seeing some of the cat. But those are all pieces in terms of impacting how well this goes. If they can't hear you very well, or you can't hear them, that's going to be problematic. So check all that stuff ahead of time to give yourself the best chance for success. And furthermore, like having been on the other side of some of these, we all have standardized questions we were supposed to ask of candidates to keep it similar rather than go on like each one its own beast, as it were. But that also means if we seem a little bit, if you're going through one of these things, you may get a sort of standardized set of things to make sure it's normalized.
I was in a couple of the phone interview. I was interviewing somebody else. So what usually happened with the research committee is we actually already assign the question. Each and every one of us already know what kind of question would we be asking, because we don't want to ask the same thing or like going above and beyond what we want to know. So that's what usually happens with the phone interview. We usually will have those.
Yeah, as Ms. Levner said, it can be awkward.
Right.
So be prepared for that, but you just got to roll with it anyway.
Right.
You've been on a bunch of search committees, I take it, right?
Mhm.
So I was just wondering, what's the general timeline from when the committee is formed till when the position is published to when you start scheduling interviews, and what period of time do you normally look at, or is it different every time?
Well, it sounds like you guys are now on your own search committees. So you want to answer this?
I don't know when we formed the committee though, but I think, can I hear a question? again?
So it's all within an annual cycle.
So, yeah, so I would imagine it follows the academic calendar to some extent, but the question is basically, what's the time frame of the process? So you have the committees formed, the position requirements are drawn up and published, and interviews are scheduled, and so is that 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months?
I think for my school, it depends on availability of the position. Let's say if we all of a sudden we just losing a couple of people, then moving on to the other positions, or like going for the graduate school. So it's really depends on the situations on year basis. If the position is become available, then we actually have a search committee, like, you know, it's a regular committee that actually already have it there. And then if the position is available, then we actually make a publish. It takes about a month to actually publish those. And for the search positions, we actually enrolling until the position was filled. So it usually do not have a timeline. Have
Did you want to
exact
comment?
timeline.
Yeah, this this depends because we have 2 searches right now, and one is almost done and one is just starting. And it was just sort of like administrative things that caught up. But what I normally noticed was that as an applicant was that I started applying in October. Like most of the job positions, at least in my field, would come out and be posted in October. The deadline would be like around December, January. They would do interviews after the spring semester started. So usually like in February would be the interviews, and then the offers would come in April. And you'd be expected to start in August, was sort of the timeline. And it was interesting, my position here, the first time I applied, it got canceled because the funds weren't there. So then someone called me and said, reapply the next year, and I got it the next year. But because they had waited too long or something happened, they lost the funding for the position.
And one other theme from today is never burn bridges. So as the timing plays out, there could be some awkward things that you may not be thinking about. Like, let's say you get approval, or you want to make a hire, you may be contingent on administrative approval. How quickly you get the administrative approval varies, and in turn impacts the hiring for no fault of the search committee or department chair's fault. There are other forces operating. Furthermore, sometimes offers are given and declined for other reasons. So don't send some nasty email. I hated this place, and screw you guys for not offering this within a week after I was there. There may be other things happening. I've known people who benefited being a second choice because of the way the process plays out. So, but just, I think one thing we heard is don't burn any bridges, because you're not necessarily aware of those forces operating behind the scenes too.
So all of you having been parts of search committees, are there any common interview mistakes that you see people making, you know, amongst a lot of your candidates?
the reason mistake that I found that I feel like it's a minor mistake though. Actually, there is one of the candidates that actually changed their interest based on the phone interview. So they actually they were interested in something on the phone interview and it sounded great already. But then it's actually probably, I don't know whether or not he received any information from someone or something. He changed those when he come on board as a campus for the campus visit. He actually, on his presentation, it changed. So it's kind of like, and then he got bombarding with the questions because those are the kind of things that actually come in because he want to make himself fit with the university. But it's actually it's beyond his comfort zone, and it's actually beyond what he know about the university. But actually, I think it's a big mistake. You should try to fit with the university, but it's to a certain extent that it's actually within your comfort zones and within your your willingness to compromise with the integrity of your research and everything else. So that basically what I think it's the key that I found.
Do you want to add to that?
We haven't done our interviews yet, but I did notice, just because we're looking through the applications for the resumes, is that some people, be careful because a lot of people, I think like 10% uploaded not all the required elements, and they're getting disqualified just based on that alone, and like their CVs look really good, but they don't have the other materials, so we have to disqualify them, and it's kind of upsetting. So just make sure you double check that.
Oh, another thing that actually I think it's a funny mistake. It's actually within your cover letter because you submit the cover letter with too many university. Don't forget to change the university name in your cover letter because if you actually make that type of mistake, it's actually making impressions about you forever. So then the search committees will know right away. Oh, he is applying for these many universities, so that's a common mistake that you actually if you copy and paste, make sure you read through it.
And here's one other anecdote. And there was someone who was invited, it made a long short list, so invited for a phone interview. And this person sent by mistake an email, and it was an egregious professional mistake. That person had intended to send it to someone else, but sent it to me, and it was horrible. What mattered was the follow-up. This person did not own the mistake, did not apologize for a mistake, and got booted from the search. This person would have been invited for a campus interview and dropped a ball so severely for a position this person would have been happy with. So the weird stuff happens. I mean, there was like a professional lesson I will never forget from that process. But those are a few anecdotes. But I think by and large what you've seen today are a discussion of patterns of how to do it well. And those patterns are pretty robust across our three speakers of research, fit, know through your research what that fit will be, who the student audience is, the kind of classes you might teach, be prepared to engage with faculty, a dean, and so forth through campus discussions. It's going to be constant, exhausting. And if you're not prepared and not asking them questions too, we see that you're not interested, or that's what it signals to us, et cetera. Those are all robust patterns, I think, is sort of the flip side of that coin.
In terms of, asking about salary or packages, your starting salary for your first job is really crucial for potential earnings throughout your career kind of thing. And unfortunately, women are still offered less than men as it is. How do you figure out what's the average pay that they're offering?
So the Chronicle of Higher Ed offers some info. So you can find some online info. Ask your colleagues. What would you guys say? I would say, I don't know what I got asked here. I was asking around.
So that you're asking people at that institution?
No. I'm asking colleagues at other places,
right,
or my advisors who wrote references because they know some of this stuff. What would you say?
I search from the internet. I'm looking at the state's range of the salary for the positions, and yeah, that's actually what I did, and I sort of know a little bit of in general what is the national average range. So that's basically what I look at, and this is that example. I didn't negotiate because when I got a job offer, the dean offered me the higher than the range already. So I'm happy. I was just like, yay! Because I was just like out from the postdoctoral fellow, didn't think that, okay, what kind of experience I have, this is actually what you need to consider. What type of experience you have. Also, what type of work have you been doing in the past? You know, how many publications, what type of grant, what type of research that you've been doing. So all that should take into considerations for your salary as well. I didn't know that. I just too happy to get the job. So that actually, but I'm still happy, so that's a good thing. So that actually what happened, but you should actually search and then also do a little bit of the study. So that's why when you got the job offer, they usually will tell you the salary for you and package for you already. Then before you say yes, you probably will have to go back and then take a look around and make a research about what would be necessary for your salary and package.
Any other thoughts, Brad?
Yeah, I'll just add, also it's gonna be, like, depending on where you get the job offer, if you get it in New York City, it's gonna be a lot, they're gonna offer more,
Right.
but the cost of living's
Exactly.
more, so you have to kind of take that in consideration. The second thing is if you get the job offer, they're gonna pressure you to give a decision like, as soon as you can. Because you're gonna ask for some time to think it over, but they're gonna be like, they're gonna try to, okay, I'll give you 2 days, or you have to negotiate so that you can have enough time to think and like do some research, I found in my experience, and so just don't let them bully you, you know, like say, I gotta think this over, I gotta, thank you for the offer, but I gotta talk to my wife or husband, whatever it is. And don't feel pressured to just give an answer within the end of the day, you know.
Would it be appropriate, once you're at that stage of negotiating, would it be appropriate to ask, what's the average starting salary you offer?
Oh, yes. At that point, you definitely should get an offer. The dean usually calls, or the chair will call you and be like, we're gonna give you an offer for this amount of money. And here's you can call our HR person to talk about the benefit package, and this is how much money is for, moving expenses. And then you say, thank you so much. This is how I did, tell me if we did it differently. I said, thank you so much. Let me think this over. I'll get back to you on Monday with an answer. And then you do it.
And one thing is, as Brian noted earlier, some of these things are more or less negotiable. And so his UCL offer, it was just not negotiable. And state schools are less negotiable sometimes than private institutions. So those are other factors to play. You can also look at Western state schools. A lot of these salary data are available online if you do your searching. So those are other.
Sorry. Another thing that you can actually, definitely should be negotiated is your startup fund. That actually is something, and based on my experience, my dean asked me to actually list all of the things that I need for me to be successful there. So that's actually something that I can actually move it up a little bit in terms of what I need to get started.
And many institutions will not require you to teach right away, give you time to start up.
Yes, that
or will
actually,
require,
that's another thing that you actually have to ask too. Some of the university, they will say, okay, we have protected time for you. You're gonna actually have to teach one course a semester. You are in academia, you cannot say, hey, I didn't want to teach. That's not possible. So you probably will end up teaching one course a semester. So they're gonna actually have you say, okay, you're gonna teach one course a semester for 3 years. That actually is the offer that I got. It's just like you get protected time for 3 years. If within that 3 years, if you do not get any grant, then your teaching load is going to be increased. So that's usually what happened in the nursing school. But that's actually, and also some of the schools say, hey, for the first semesters, we don't require you to teach, but for the second semester, you will start teaching and more. So that's basically, especially with the tenure track, that would be a negotiations that you need to make. And also, the teaching loads is something that when you negotiate it, you need to get it in writing as well, because that's the kind of things that it can change. This actually happened to my friends that actually get negotiated. The offer was 3 credits the semester for 3 years. This is actually what happened when the faculty left or something, and then they actually changed that, and they asked her if she's willing to actually add one more courses in her second years, and she's actually negotiated, and she said, well, you know, this is what contract I signed for, so that is something that we need to be considered.
So on that note, we've hit time, so I'd like to thank our three panelists in particular. So thank you, Ms. Levner, for joining us and allowing us to learn about the process in film. And again, ask her any other film production questions after this too. Dr. Lukkahatai coming from nursing, and then Dr. Villmoare, who also ran off to teach in anthropology. But collectively, again, you see some of the patterns in this otherwise vague process, the mysteries unveiled. So thank you guys.
Thank you.